So recently, the Charlotte community was shocked and it was galvanized when this video started to circulate. It shows a man pulling his car over in a Plaza Midwood parking lot, and then we see him come around to the back seat of that car, and he starts striking a dog several times. I actually posted about this on social media, and this video, the response that I got from folks in the community, it was overwhelming. A lot of people said that this video made them sick to their stomachs, that they couldn't even watch the whole thing. And so this really struck a chord with a lot of people out there. Now, that said, this video actually shows what animal welfare workers say that they see the consequence of each and every day. They say that they know that this exists firsthand. This is much more common than many people like to think about. But like I said, the community was stunned, and people ended up posting this video and sharing it so widely online. In fact, we see here this video was posted on Reddit, but I also saw it on Instagram. People were talking about it on Facebook. But it was circulated so widely that authorities were actually able to identify and arrest the man in a matter of days. And so this is the man, CMPD says, is responsible for the attack in that video. CMPD says Connor Howard is facing a felony animal cruelty charge and also a charge of violating probation for a prior offense. And now we looked that offense up, we went through court records, and we were able to determine that the prior offense was a domestic violence charge, according to court records. And really, this situation highlights a dynamic that those in the criminal justice system say is actually well established. They know about this relationship here between a willingness to commit violence against animals and a willingness to harm another human being. They say this goes hand in hand pretty well, and there are actually some concerning stats that we're going to share in just a bit linking those two things together. It's also one of the reasons why we hear animal advocates saying constantly that they want stronger penalties for animal abusers, and animal protections and human protections, they say, frequently intertwine. And so once again, that's one of the reasons why they are always asking for stronger penalties. I'm Vanessa Ruffes, and I'm going to be your host here as we explore this topic more in depth right now, as April is recognized as Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Month. So in light of this case that we just talked about out of Plaza Midwood, we sat down with a Charlotte animal rescue. It's called Forgotten Now Family, and the founder, Chrissy Elder, talked to us about her group, and she says that her group, Forgotten Now Family, is one of the leading rescues in our area taking animal cruelty cases. So they work really closely with law enforcement in our area, taking in animals seized in dogfighting cases and abuse cases, neglect cases. And she says while they see a lot, they say they are constantly seeing and dealing with these types of cases, seeing animal suffering. She says she thinks that the general public doesn't really have an eye to this, that they don't really think about how often these cases actually happen. Take a listen.
It's important to bring awareness to it, to talk about it more openly. It's something that's kind of taboo to a lot of people. You know, they say it breaks my heart, so I don't want to hear about it or talk about it. But unfortunately, these animals don't have that right and that choice. They have to live it. So I think talking about it more, absolutely, laws need to be, increased to where it's harsher punishment for animal cruelty. And I think education goes a really long way. Knowing what to look for. If you see something, say something. Going through proper reporting channels. And that's something that on our social media we're really forward with and helping people. And you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to give guidance on what to do and how to report.
That being said, we wanted to mention Forgotten Now Family. They're pretty active on social media, particularly Instagram. So if you did want to reach out to them or learn more, you can always find them there. That's a great way to see some of the cases that they deal with. Now, we mentioned that we have some eye-opening stats regarding animal and human violence and the relationship between it. So we wanted to share some information that we were able to find from the FBI. So the Bureau says, we have some graphics here to show, but 75% of abused women with pets report that their intimate partner has also threatened or harmed their pet. And in more than 90% of these cases, so virtually all, 90% of these cases, children were there witnessing that violence. FBI also says animal cruelty is a predictor of current and future violence, and it even outlines some of the violence that this entails. So they're saying this could be linked to crimes of assault, rape, murder, arson, domestic violence, and even sexual abuse of children. And on that note, and disturbingly so, the FBI also says that animal cruelty is actually a better predictor of sexual abuse compared to someone having a history of homicide, arson, or a weapons conviction. More on this topic to come. We're going to be speaking with some experts, as well as folks who are kind of on the front lines of animal welfare and also domestic violence support. Ahead, we're going to sit down one-on-one with one of our reporters, Miles Harris. He recently reported on a group out of Union County, North Carolina. This group's trying to change laws protecting animals, make these stronger laws. And they say that North Carolina rules are decades old, which is why they don't help animals as much as they think the rules should. A bit later, too, we're going to look at a different way that animal welfare and domestic violence intersect. So I wanted to ask you this. If you had to quickly leave a dangerous situation at home and you have a furry family member and you wanted to take them with you, where would you go if you just had to flee in an instant? Well, in Charlotte, the answer, unfortunately, might be 2 hours away. You would have to go far away from this area and get there quickly. And that's because many shelters in the Charlotte area aren't set up to take pets. But we're going to look at efforts to change that. We'll be right back. So we continue to talk about the intertwining of animal welfare and people welfare. And so specifically speaking on policy, we are seeing some pushes in our area, the Charlotte area, to kind of change the way policy is, enforced and what the rules are when it comes to animals. So we have WCNC Charlotte reporter Miles Harris talking to us right now. You recently spoke with a group that is pushing to make some changes in Union County specifically. So tell us about this group and what do they want to see?
Yeah, so it's the group called Change for Union County, a very big animal advocacy group, you can say. I talked to Katie Ryan. She is one of the organizers for this group. And they're really looking to kind of update these ordinances specifically in that area. They haven't had updated ordinances in nearly 30 years, which is such a crazy thing to kind of look at and think about. Since 1997, they've had the same animal ordinances. And, we look at it like, what's some of the things that have really been changing during that time? And the big thing is COVID, right? So how did COVID really impact these animals and really these homes as well? And we're seeing just a massive uptick in animals that are not even in homes, but they're unsheltered animals. And so the conditions of these animals is a big concern for this group in this area. And so they're looking to kind of make some changes and hopefully better take care and really enhance the welfare for these animals as well. I did get a chance to talk to Katie Ryan, and she really kind of broke down just why these ordinances and really the changes for those ordinances are so important for this group.
What made us focus on the petition is it's just not possible for us to rescue ourselves out of the national pet crisis. We can rescue as many dogs like Frost as we can, but if we don't stop the number of dogs breeding in the community, it's just going to continue to increase year over year. So what we wanted to do was really look strategically at what can be done in the community that's common sense, that respects our rural traditions, while also targeting the public safety of residents and the welfare of animals. So we've identified the ordinances. The ordinances in Union County have not been updated since 1997. Union County looks very different than it was in 1997. We've had a 40% population increase. And with that density, with all of the growth and development, that's really changed what we need from our ordinances to keep both people and pets safe.
And so what's interesting about that, and during our conversation, I would say one of the pieces or examples of the ordinances that really stuck out in my mind, Vanessa, was she was saying that you could put like a box next to a wall outside that would qualify as shelter for these animals. And like you think about the winter conditions that we just went through, that's not as realistic as we would need for these animals that we're seeing throughout, whether it's Union County, whether it's here in Charlotte, in any part of the country. It's a concern, and especially for this group, which is why they're asking for these changes.
Yeah, I think, you brought up the fact that this is maybe a surprise to some folks that they don't realize, well, this is okay as a shelter, and this is something that I hear through, folks who are involved with animal advocacy. For example, if there's a group out there that is in charge of rescuing, let's say dogs, they get a call from a concerned person in a neighborhood that says, hey, I think my neighbor is mistreating their animal or not keeping them in a safe condition. Animal control inevitably comes out. They look at the dog and they go, well, the dog's not in great shape, but the dog is not in bad enough shape that we can actually take the dog and save the dog. So I think that comes as a surprise to a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the fact that it's been since '97 that these local ordinances haven't been updated. We see pushes from folks on the state level too, trying to change North Carolina's laws overall, because those, we've heard rank in the bottom 10 according to some animal advocacy groups as far as protections for animals.
Yeah.
You've heard about animal cruelty cases from this group. It sounds like this is one of the main drivers behind this. Any specific cases that come to mind or things that kind of opened your eyes?
A couple of things, though, too. And it was a little unfortunate, too, because even in the days and leading up to that, we're seeing, like, dogs on the side of the road. And so that was the big thing that this group had seen. They had also mentioned that there was a specific dog at a Dollar Tree in that area that unfortunately didn't make it through these winter conditions. And so you're hearing about a lot of stray dogs or dogs that aren't being taken care of that are actually pregnant at this case, though, too. And so when we talk about the impacts of COVID, they're still producing as well. These animals and these dogs specifically are still producing in this area, but there's nowhere for them to go. And so you mentioned the animal care in areas, whether it's Charlotte here as well. The other tricky part about it is there's nowhere for these shelters to take these animals either. They're super overpopulated. I know you know that, Vanessa. And so it's just trying to come up with the best possible solutions, not just for pet owners, but for these animals, because, we know they need it. They absolutely do.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about how animal welfare does, inherently come with people welfare. We've talked about, the link between animal abuse and domestic violence, but also, we've just seen, the actual impacts of having stray animals run around and, being unchecked and not having the resources to essentially wrangle them or, keep them from hurting people too. So that's another thing.
Yeah, and exactly, especially if they're not and I wouldn't say trained, but if they're not familiar with somebody, we don't know how that can go, and it's not a position that they should be put in though either. I know we talked about, I mentioned the winter months where it's cold, but some of these dogs, they don't have food either. And so we talked to Katie, and she loved one of the pets that she had with her was a dog that they were making sure that they were getting rescued and taken care of, Frost. Mm-hmm. Frost was a star. We loved Frost, and he was still a little shy. It took us a little while to get warmed up to us, but just seeing the look on his face and seeing the hopeless, I got to be honest with you, it just seemed like they just didn't know what was next for that dog. And so to see the impact that you hope that this group, this community can make for him, can really make a difference. But they need help though too, right? We talked about the help that they need, whether it's at a local level from the Board of Commissioners, whether it's state level. These animals, these people, they need help, right? And so hopefully they can get it sooner rather than later, because I'll be honest, I'm sick of seeing, helpless dogs on the side of the road or in a plaza or an area that there's nobody to defend for them. And so it's happening way too often now.
What did you learn from this group about, what they think the public can do, if their eyes have been opened or they feel like they really want to make a difference or an impact? Did they talk about ways that folks can maybe change things if they feel like they want to change?
The support, I think, is the big general one, though, too. And I think when they addressed the Board of Commissioners in Union County, it was the biggest aha from what I even had seen from the recording and talked to them about it as well, is that there's just some ordinances that they weren't familiar with. And so I think the biggest thing with this is, beyond just the general support, is having that conversation. We need to have that conversation. Okay, well, why are these ordinance changes changing? What can we do to better supply the help and support for these, not just for this group, but for these animals as well? And so obviously they're looking for the volunteer work, whatever can be done as far as taking animals in, helping them go from one place to another, getting them off the streets, getting them out of these places that don't have shelter, and really just finding these people these homes, these animals these homes, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they mentioned a petition too. Is that still something that they'd like folks to look at?
Yeah, definitely would still look for help on that petition. Obviously, go over to our website. We have that petition on there as well for people to kind of learn more about just this group, their efforts, and what this petition means. We talked about what these ordinances are. What are these ordinances, right? But specifically, what are they asking for? One, bigger shelter. They need more shelter room to kind of to take care of these dogs. They're also asking for an animal service committee. People that are experts that are familiar with this and kind of helping navigate the ordinances that need to be changed as well. And funding. I mean, we need more funding when it comes to helping spay and neuter these animals. Just again, that conversation is such a big thing, and it can go really a long way. And I'm hoping that this conversation keeps going for this group. And we talked about it. It's not just Union County. I mean, this is happening all over the state and all over the country. And so hopefully this conversation can go beyond that as well.
Yeah, important dialogue. Thank you so much for sharing what you've learned. And I know you talked about the potential for wanting to follow up with other stories, so keep us posted.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it as well.
All
So
right.
thank you, Vanessa.
Miles, thank you so much. I'm Vanessa Ruffes, and you're watching our in-depth look at the relationship between people and animal welfare. So having set the table earlier with some of the concerning stats and examples of the close relationship between violence against animals and violence against people, we wanted to bring in some insight from our local justice system. So I previously sat down with the Mecklenburg County District Attorney Spencer Merriweather, and this was following a large dogfighting case that was finally resolved after 2 years out of the Charlotte area. Now this man here, Earl Hamilton, in that case, pleaded to 5 counts of felony dogfighting, 12 counts of felony animal cruelty, 12 counts of misdemeanor animal cruelty, and 3 counts of misdemeanor cruel restraint. So there are a lot of charges there. And also keep in mind, we have a mix of felony and misdemeanor charges. Now, when everything was said and done and the punishment was handed down, we did see probation. And then the other main punishment was that he had to surrender any animals in his care, and he had a ban on owning animals for 5 years, meaning after 5 years, he could potentially own dogs again. And this was after police say that dozens of dogs were found at his home, that there was evidence that they were forced to engage in blood sport, and that some of these dogs did eventually not survive. We know that a handful died or had to be humanely euthanized due to their conditions. Many in the Charlotte community, after we reported on this case, I put it on social media, just in talking with folks who are plugged into the animal community, I heard time and time again that they were just beyond appalled that the case turned out this way, that this was the punishment rendered. And we heard from animal advocates saying that this was a slap on the wrist. They said this does nothing to deter this man from participating in this behavior, to deter others, to send a message to others that this behavior is unacceptable. And in fact, speaking of Earl Hamilton, we found a 2014 report from the NBC affiliate out of Raleigh showing that this man had made headlines in other parts of North Carolina multiple times before the Charlotte case even happened. There were animal abuse charges. The report also noted at least 2 other instances of animal cruelty accusations. Those were in 2010 and 2014. So, as I mentioned, I spoke with the district attorney in our area about this, and this is what Spencer Merriweather told me about North Carolina animal welfare laws.
The most serious offenses for animal cruelty and dogfighting sort of top out at what is commonly referred to as a low-level felony, a Class H felony. So for each of those, a judge could sentence someone to a prison sentence, but it's more likely that they would serve a probationary sentence.
Do you wish that there could be more possibilities?
Here's what I'll say this, and I'm probably better if I speak more broadly about animal cruelty and about dogfighting, and I'll say this. People often don't consider what really is at stake. First of all, obviously we're talking about animals that can't come in and testify for themselves. They are, by definition, a vulnerable entity. But I think what people often miss is the relationship between the cruelty that happens to animals and how that impacts cruelty to human beings. That we know that in the prosecution of domestic violence throughout our jurisdiction or across the country, that this is a factor in judging the lethality of a domestic violence offender. That if someone is willing to harm an animate being, that we know that it's not that much of a leap and a jump before they commit that same sort of violence before a human being. We have a couple of Class H felonies, low-level felonies, that we think of as violent, but for some reason our statutes and the way that the sentences that are associated with them are in fact not common among violent offenses. Assault by strangulation is one, but our animal cruelty and dogfighting are right there with it, where these are indicators of a violent nature that can be taken out on human beings, and yet the sentencing doesn't reflect that. Obviously, it's up to our General Assembly to decide what sentences should ultimately be, but clearly this is one where the sentence that's there doesn't necessarily reflect the violent nature of the conduct itself. Whenever we have one of these cases, we certainly hear a lot from the community, and I often say that it's important that we hear from you, because that helps build our collective conscience and of what we take to members of the jury, members of the community who need to know why this is important, and just as important that those citizens take that same voice to members of our General Assembly to let them know that it's important to them and maybe should be more than just a Class H felony, that they should be taken seriously as an indicator of violence, not just to animals, but to human beings as well.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly don't want to see people who could be violent.
Absolutely not. And more importantly, you don't want to see it. That members of our community don't want to see it. Certainly, I don't want to have any more violent conduct that arrives in our courthouse, but well before that, we don't want to see people who have shown some sort of demonstration of violence against any animate being, just to have that not taken seriously. We want to make sure that that's taken seriously.
So some really eye-opening insights from the district attorney there. And not only was I struck by just the relationship that he illustrated between committing violence against animals and how they see that link to not only committing violence against humans, but also he said it's a predictor of the severity of that violence, of domestic violence, and what a person might be willing to do. But he also talked about the fact that there are avenues for folks to change things if they don't necessarily agree with the protections, with the laws in place. And so we'll talk a bit more about that later in this program. But we have a few more experts to speak with. And when we come back, we wanted to talk about this effort to make sure that pets are included in the equation if a person does need to leave a violent situation at home. And we talk about the consequences, the unfortunate consequences that we have seen and these folks have seen on people and on pets when a safe house or shelter is not set up to take and serve everyone who's being abused in a household. All right, so we continue to dive into this connection between animal welfare as well as domestic violence, people welfare, if you will, well-being. And I'm joined now by Lori Westhoff with Purina to talk about a really interesting pet project, if you will. This is the Purple Leash Project. And Lori, just for folks who have never heard of this, can you talk more about the goals for Purple Leash Project and how it brings the topics of people and pets together?
Yeah, absolutely. The Purple Leash Project was really born out of just this knowledge that domestic violence survivors are less likely to leave and will delay leaving. About 50% of them will delay leaving their abuser if they don't have a place to go that will also allow their pet. So Purina, in partnership with a nonprofit, Red Rover, we started the Purple Leash Project as a national program in 2019. And our goal is to help more domestic violence shelters across the country become pet friendly, and just make sure that survivors have resources available so that they can leave their abuser and they can heal together with their pets. It's critical.
Something that folks are surprised to learn is the fact that there are quite a few shelters, not only in our area, but nationwide, where they don't actually have facilities or ways to keep the folks who are leaving these dangerous situations with their pets together. There usually some sort of tough decision that has to be made. Do I separate with my pet? Do I leave them behind in a bad situation? And that's, I think surprising to some folks to hear.
Yeah, I think because of the role that pets play in our lives, right? I mean, they're really extensions of our family. And so the idea that social services haven't maybe caught up to that is pretty surprising. I think there is an expectation that people would be able to leave with their pets. I think that the domestic violence service, organizations are really trying to catch up to that. And they're really focused on helping people first, and that's been the core of their mission. I think what we're finding is the more that we talk about this and the role of pets, there is an openness by domestic violence service providers to really say, yeah, you know what, we have turned down offering support, or people have declined support if they couldn't bring their pet. Let's really figure out this dynamic, unpack it, and do what we can to make accommodations. And sometimes the accommodations are literally making their environments pet friendly so that they can bring them in shelter with survivors. But sometimes it's really critical partnerships with other organizations in the community that like a pet shelter, for example, that will say, we'll take those pets so that the survivor can get to safety. We will keep those pets safe and cared for, and then the hope then is reunification. It still ultimately, keeps them together, and that's the dynamic that we're hoping for.
Something that was interesting to learn for me was a little while back, I did an interview with our area district attorney, and this was following a pretty big dogfighting case that had concluded in our area. And something that he mentioned was the link between animal abuse, animal cruelty, and I guess the potential to commit violence against people. I mean, is that something that y'all have seen as well, a link between being willing to hurt an animal and being willing to hurt a person?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there is research and documentation proving that link to be very true and very scary. If we look at, the vulnerability of a pet, pets rely on us as people for everything. And so an abuser may start with a pet, and in an abusive relationship that may grow from I'm going to abuse, and that may be verbally assaulting, it may be physically assaulting a pet, this animal that you hold so dear, to absolutely escalating to human abuse. And I think that there's a lot of documentation too about really keeping an eye on children who may be abusive towards animals, and trying to get support and help so that doesn't evolve as they grow into physical or emotionally abusive relationships also with other people. So it's absolutely true that there is a link between the two.
As far as the Purple Leash Project goes, are there any specific goals that you all have for the upcoming year or the rest of this year? And if so, how are those goals going? Is there anything, I guess, that we should know about the Carolinas, that might be part of your projects for this year?
Yeah, I mean, our goal for this year is to continue providing support and grants. So to date, since we started the program, we've provided over 50 grants to organizations, nonprofits across the country to help them become pet friendly. We want to continue that work. And our ultimate goal is to help ensure that 25% of shelters across the country are pet friendly by the end of this year. I'm really hopeful that we'll continue getting closer to that goal. Right now, about 17% of shelters across the country are pet friendly. We want to keep moving toward, more and more of those. So if we can get to 25% by the end of this year, it'll be phenomenal. But either way, we're going to continue the work. I think when it comes to, North Carolina specifically, we're looking at every state and looking to support shelters that are willing to kind of take this journey. And, Purina, we have a factory location in Eden, North Carolina. It is a state that's incredibly important to us as a company. And, we prioritize that as we're looking at, where do we offer our support? And so I would just encourage, any shelters, anyone with ties to domestic violence services who may be learning more about this issue to consider, is this an opportunity to really lean into providing more holistic services for survivors with pets in your area?
We had talked offline a bit about Safe Flight and how this is possibly the closest shelter to the Charlotte area that has the kennels on site, the ability to take pets. And I mean, how did this partnership come about? And have you gotten any updates on how things are going over there? And, has that changed things for them?
Yeah, Safe Flight applied for a grant, so they're in Henderson County, and they applied for a grant. We provided $60,000 in support for them in 2023. Our understanding is that that work has happened, that they've provided and built kenneling on site, other services, some security measures too to help, make sure that the pets on site are protected, and are really seeing a lot of benefits in how that serves their communities and the survivors that come into their care.
I saw that you're a pet owner, you have a dog.
Yeah, he's probably sleeping behind me.
I'm just, wondering how you feel personally, about this issue and being able to be part of trying to bring solutions, as a pet owner and obviously as someone who cares about how other people are faring and whether they are getting into better situations than they're in right now.
Yeah, for me, this has been really illuminating. And it's been an opportunity to not just learn more, but have a true impact on other people, all centered around this shared love that we have for pets. And, being part of Purina as an organization that really believes in the power of that bond and really works every day to cultivate and support that bond. The Purple Leash Project has been, just an incredible opportunity for us to show outwardly that we believe that pets and people are better together. And we're not just saying that, we're putting the work and the rigor behind that. We're advocating for federal funding, even for, domestic violence shelters to become pet friendly. There's a lot of work that's going into this because it truly just supports our belief that pets are extensions of our family and they deserve to be protected.
Speaking of putting in the work for folks who might be watching this at home and they feel like their eyes have been opened, they're interested in helping or playing some part in achieving these goals of helping other people and helping pets, what can folks do at home?
Yeah, I think people at home, first and foremost, I always encourage people to look in their local community, to reach out to domestic violence shelters and see what their needs are and how they can help. Supporting the Purple Leash Project is pretty easy. I think making a donation is probably the easiest way in. If you go to purpleleashproject.com, you can contribute. And we absolutely appreciate all of that. And all of the funds that are raised go directly to support shelters. But I think just opening hearts and minds, understanding and looking around and really, really appreciating the relationship that we have with our pets and looking in our communities and saying, where are areas that we can support others, and starting there is really a great place to start.
Thank you again, Lori. I appreciate your time. And once again, what's the website where folks can go to learn more about Purple Leash Project?
Purpleleashproject.com.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, it is good to hear that there are efforts underway to make more shelters across the nation pet friendly, just so everyone feels like they have a place to go and that they can take their pets with them if they're trying to leave a dangerous situation. We mentioned the fact that one of the shelters closest to Charlotte that's actually set up to take animals is not that close to Charlotte. Unfortunately, that shelter is 2 hours away. But we were able to reach out to this shelter, Project Safe Light, and it was able to shed some light on the inroads it was able to make in helping folks once it decided to add kennels to its facility and basically open the door for folks to come in and seek shelter with their furry family members. We are continuing our discussion here about domestic violence and also kind of the intertwining between this topic and animal welfare. And one thing that we've really noticed is, a concern in the number of shelters that actually have animal services on site. In some ways, we see if you don't have the animal services on site, maybe somebody might not want to come and get help from you. So we're joined with folks from Safe Light. And so y'all are in Western North Carolina. You're about an hour and 45 minutes from what I could tell from the Charlotte area, which is where I am. But y'all look like you are the closest shelter to us where you can actually come and bring in animals. Is that correct?
That is accurate. There's only a handful of shelters nationally that offer on-site pet service care. And in fact, our agency's 41 years old this year. It wasn't until we were about to turn 40 that we added it as an on-site project. And it took a couple of years to be able to add it.
And I understand this was something that was made possible by the Purple Leash Project with Purina and how they have this goal to try to make more of our shelters across the nation pet friendly. From your perspective as an organization that provides the animal services now, what sort of difference has that made for you and for your clients?
Oh, it's huge. And it took a lot of partners to the table to make this addition in our facility. It was a several $100,000 project to retrofit our building to add it. We knew it was necessary as we were having calls to our 24/7 hotline of folks who were deciding not to come here and flee violence because in many cases their only last loving family member was not going to be able to come with them, their dog or cat. And so because of those calls and tracking those numbers and working with our local partners with Blue Ridge Humane Society, we knew we needed to figure out how to add it on site and not as a fostering option. And so we tackled it together, and it took a few years to figure out where, how, and how to fundraise.
I had alluded to this before, the fact that in some of my volunteer work that I've done on the side, I've heard of cases where somebody might choose not to go because they don't want to leave behind their pet. But it sounds like these folks might also feel like their pet might physically be in danger if the pet is left behind. It's almost like the pet becomes, leverage for their abuser.
Absolutely. And in most cases in abuse and violence, we see the pet to be the first attacked in a family. And so for us, it's making sure that every member of that family is able to flee that violent or abusive situation.
How does your pet services work? Does the person come and they bring their pet and there's a separate kennel and they have help, or are they largely in charge of taking care of their own pet when they come?
Absolutely. Dana, I'm going to let you talk that one.
Yeah, so our kennel space is a little bit separated by roughly 2 floors from our actual shelter space. So, which gives us, it's nice for our clients that don't have pets here that the pets are very much safely apart from the general population. And we have a cat kennel space that's its own room with 4 kennels. So we can house 4 cats at a time. And that room completely shuts off. So the cats can be out in that space. It's like very much a cozy living room space with a television, music, that kind of thing, couch. And then we have a living room off of that is for the dog owners. And that's also, it's a little larger given that that's the dog space, also with couch, TV, coffee table, that kind of thing. And that's also closed off and sealed off from the rest of the building. And then off of that living room is our dog kennels where we can house up to 3 dogs in that space. And so generally, they come in, we orient them to that space. We give them kind of, on the hotline call, we give them kind of the lay of the land so they know coming in how things are laid out, that they are a little bit separated from their pets, but we're all in the same building.
So just like someone coming with their child, you're in charge of your pet as much as you are your children. But we give all the resources, which we could talk about more. But I do like to joke that our kennel spaces are they're commercial kennels. So think of them as like mini apartments for the pets. They're large.
Yeah, that's nice. And do you find that you have adequate donations to handle pets as well? I can imagine if you have someone who's kind of showing up spur of the moment and they have a dog, you probably have to have like dog food on hand, bowls and leashes and that sort of thing.
This is why I love our partnership. We really didn't want to take away from our local shelter being the lead expert for pet care, so that we weren't having to look up what was the recalled food or toys of the month. They make sure that we have all of the appropriate pet care products, and they're sub-granted for us to do that. So food, toys, vaccines, medical care is all covered with a sub-grant through us to them to be a partner with us for the project.
Incredible. That's full service.
Yes.
So I just received an email right before this meeting from Blue Ridge Humane, our point of contact over there, and like they just came this morning and just did another, round of donations with all the wet and dry cat and dog food, all of our flea and tick prevention, new toys, new leashes, new harnesses, just replenished. It was like a fairy godmother just showing up and just like poof, it's just all there. And I didn't even know she was here until I got the email. So they are just fabulous to work with.
And when the pet owners move out with their pet, they can take all of that pet's bed, toys, food bowl with them, and the next pet gets a fresh set.
Do you know by chance off the top of your head maybe how many folks you've helped / pets you've helped since the kennels have been installed?
Mm-hmm. We're at 34 pets, and we opened December of 2023. So it's been about a year and a couple of months. So we are, if you divide that up, we're at 15 dogs and 19 cats that we've served. We currently have 1 dog and 3 cats in shelter right now.
And is that a large or notable percentage of your clients, or is it a relatively small amount of your clients percentage-wise, do you think?
It's a small percentage of the population that we serve in shelter, but I will say like our 3 cats that we have right now belong to 1 client. So we do have kind of groupings of pets. We've had folks with multiple cats. We do get calls about people with 2 dogs that they want to bring in. It just depends on what our space availability is. But, just to give you a sense of the urgency, we had 1 survivor that literally called us from her car, and she had to resort to living in her car with her dog for probably about a month's time, and not knowing that she could have shelter with her dog. And that was a severe stalking case. And so it's just stories like that we like to share as success stories. And it just gives you this sense of urgency for folks.
And I was just adding, in that same time frame in that year, we had 256 humans, 40% were kids in our shelter of the 34 pets. And I do remember, sometimes it's just a single female with a pet, or I don't know if we've had any single males with pets that I can recall, but we've had several big families. So family of 4 with their dog. And I just couldn't have imagined them being here and not having their dog with them, and that fear of, is the dog okay or not?
Right. It's often children that are very much connected to these pets as well as it's part of their family.
Yeah. Have you found that there have been any, I don't want to say unintended benefits of having the pets around, or I know you said that they're largely kept separate away from, the general population, but do you find that having the pets there maybe helps the process more than maybe you would have thought?
Yeah, I would say that as a shelter staff, we have a team of 9 people that work 24/7 in our shelter. And that first dog that landed in our space, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. I mean, it touches us as staff members too. We're all, I could safely say we're all dog and cat owners and lovers, and we're all big, animal lovers. So and we're charged with constantly checking the space and checking on the animals. We don't care for the animals directly, but we're very much involved. And we see how these owners respond when they land in such a safe and inviting space. So I would say we're touched by it just as much as the families.
Can you recall or think of any specific, situations that just stick in your mind before you had the kennels where maybe you were consulting with someone and they were like, no, no, thanks. I don't think I can leave XYZ, or I don't even want to have to keep my pet in the county shelter and come and, separate from them. Are there any like situations that kind of just stand out? You remember them?
So many. I would say I had at least 2 to 3 of those a month, which is what made me have sort of the call to action to figure out how to make this happen so quickly. And it may not feel so quickly. It took nearly 3 years to build, fund, and open it, but that's pretty quick when you're doing a couple $100,000 renovation. And for us, I can remember, similarly as Dana was telling the story of the woman in the car, I can remember a woman with a cat who decided, because she couldn't find where to go live in a county park and pay the fees to stay in her car in the park with her cat and camp rather than be separated.
And on the flip side of that, Vanessa, we've had folks that did unfortunately have to abandon their pets, because it was such a severe and urgent situation. We have had folks that come here and kind of get settled in, having left their pets, with a family member or with someone, maybe that they didn't trust 100%, but they got here and then they were able to bring that pet maybe a few days later once they could kind of see the space and understand that, yes, they could bring them here. So we've worked with, lots of different situations.
Wow.
And before we had this, for years, we partnered with Blue Ridge Health to foster the pets there. But visiting hours were certain times of the day, and it's about a 20+ minute drive to get there. So it's really difficult for folks to go visit their pets while they were in care.
Mm-hmm. What would it mean for you to see more shelters, statewide, nationwide, have these types of services?
Well, we've seen people have to relocate to here because we were an option, and it may be several hours away from their family and friends and their lives. And it's really hard to build a life in Western North Carolina, especially post-Helene. There's less job and housing availability. So it would mean for that family to have access to something closer to the home and the life they've built. And it would be great to have that resource in more locations.
Yeah. I guess as far as, policy goes or, needs that you have, it doesn't necessarily have to be animal related, but I mean, is there anything that you see on your end that is something that could change either with policy or funding, community response, anything like that, that could fix or interrupt the domestic violence cycle? I can tell you here in Charlotte, we've had so many cases, it seems like lately. And I know, sometimes it feels like it's a lot, but it feels like it's a lot lately. And I'm just struck thinking, like, what could we possibly do to make the situation better?
Well, we know statistically when there's an increase in stressors in life, there's an increased use in drugs, alcohol, and violence goes up. When you have a system where the political economy is stressed and people are worried about inflation, and we've just had here a natural disaster, then there isn't a direct correlation to increased violence and abuse because of that. So we're seeing the same things over here that you're seeing in Charlotte and nationally. We do expect and are trying to get ahead of some of the increased needs that we're expecting over the next year just from the stressors that we're all experiencing.
Wow. I mean, what does that look like? Are you trying to get more funding?
Well, wouldn't you like to know?
Yeah.
We've just been awarded a grant. We've been in Q4 to expand our shelter. So we're actually growing our human beds. We're going to go from 13 to 20 rooms, 40 to 56 bed capacity as we get ahead of the increased need that's coming. We recognize that's the fastest way we can help with there being less housing availability and more violence and abuse in the area.
Wow. That's really sad. That's really sad and upsetting to think that it's almost like you're staring down the barrel of a gun right now. Like you feel pretty confident, you sound pretty confident that there will be more cases. There will be an increase.
Absolutely.
On the prevention side, is there anything that you share as far as, trying to get ahead of the issue, if at all possible?
Always. So we are in all of the Henderson County schools, letting people know we're here, letting teachers, faculty members, and kids know signs of abuse, violence, and how to link to safe flight so that we can get ahead of it first. One of the main ways to prevent violence is to know that it's happening early, and our kids tend to be the best route to get DSS and law enforcement involved to get them linked to care. Every year, 40% of our clients are kids.
We also have a focus, Vanessa, on sustainability. We work diligently doing case management and getting survivors back into independence and sustainable futures, whether it be through their jobs, through their housing, so that they are less likely to return to abusive situations. And not only that, we also, on the flip side of things, we work in what's called a domestic violence intervention program, where we work with perpetrators as well. So we see the broader picture of things, and we work with the folks that have abused in the past, and we look at how they can also change, whether it's their thinking cognitively, and look at their past and how they can heal and grow and not be violent in their futures as well.
Is there anything from, a legal or, public policy standpoint that you find is maybe a hindrance or something that could be changed to make the situation better?
There are a lot of public policies that could be added to make us all safer. They're not very, it is very expensive for someone to go through the court process, and it takes a really long time. So while we run the shelter program, we also run a family advocacy center, which is a family justice center affiliation, which is about legal advocacy and support through that process, which can take years, especially if there's children involved. So for us, the process is lengthy and expensive for a survivor to go through, especially when you're trying to work through custody battles. For us also, on the flip side, there are a lot of gun law loopholes that make it really easy and accessible for people to get dangerous weapons. And that should be something that we take more seriously as a society.
Are there specific examples that you've run into where the loophole has caused an issue for one of your clients?
Not directly here, but I have in other agencies in other counties.
Okay. We've seen situations, in our area where unfortunately we've had people who have lost their lives in some recent cases. And then we've heard after the fact from law enforcement that this has been house that they've been called to before for domestic issues. And it just kind of gets me thinking whether, there are certain ways that law enforcement has their hands bound to try to prevent something. I mean, is there anything that could change on that front?
Absolutely. Yeah, we work really hard with all of our law enforcement municipalities. We run a national model with them called the Lethality Assessment Program, which is nationally accredited through Maryland. And us and other agencies in North Carolina use this model. It is a preventative assessment that they use as a first responder on the scene with a survivor to measure how lethal is the situation and help link them as fast as they can to our hotline and prevention services. I would say for us, that's been why I do not have a case example here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For folks who are at home and they're watching this and they feel like they want to make an impact in a good way on this, issue, do you have any recommendations of, ways to educate themselves, things that they can do? For example, if they feel like they want to reach out to policymakers or if they want to donate, is there any place you can direct them or, specific literature that you'd like to point out for them to read?
Absolutely. There's a lot of literature. I'd love to send you a few links to share with the program to link some of those. I would say donate to your local shelter that's serving survivors. We're poly-victimization, so domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, human trafficking, elder abuse. But look for the agency in your county and see how you can volunteer, donate maybe your time, talent, treasure, even if it's cleaning out your closet. Start small and build with them a relationship to help make a difference.
Is there anything that I didn't ask that you just would want included in the story? Just something that folks should know before we wrap things up?
I have a really awesome letter that one of our survivors sent us from her pup after staying in shelter. And I would love to read it because I think there's nothing that Dana or I could say better than she said through her dog's voice.
Oh.
She said, "Why aren't dogs good dancers? Because they have 2 left feet. I think my mom's jokes are funny. She tells me it's only because I'm a chahaha. I love seeing my mom smile again. Thanks to every one of you. Thank you all for everything, for our safety, shelter, and even food. It was all absolutely bon appetit.
Oh.
We will be forever grateful for your positivity, amazing kindness, and support that every one of you are so awesome. Thank you very much. We love you all."
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so sweet.
And there's a paw print.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Well, we certainly hope that you learned something during the course of this program, and we did want to leave you with this. We hear time and time again from animal advocates that part of the battle here that they're fighting is just trying to inform the community, to give knowledge to the community about what's happening out there, and also how to change things if folks don't agree with what they're seeing. For example, we brought this up before in the reporting on the Charlotte dogfighting case. One of the most common comments that I heard from the public was how the punishment for multiple felony animal cruelty charges was so much lesser than what they expected. And you heard in our sit down with the district attorney that that is what North Carolina allows for. So if people aren't okay with that, if they're not okay with the law and what the law says a punishment should be, they should tell their lawmakers, because that's who would ultimately change things. Advocacy groups also say that there are many ways to educate yourself. If you want to get involved, you could start hyper-local, so maybe that's reaching out to city council members or county commissioners wherever you are if you're concerned with your local ordinances. State representatives, of course, if you're concerned about your state laws, and then, of course, Congress people if you're interested in nationwide changes. If you don't know where to start, there are a whole lot of animal rescue groups out there that might be not only willing but very excited to talk about the causes that they believe in and how you can help. And there's even national groups too, like ASPCA and the United States Humane Society. They have advocacy arms that can provide more information on some of the efforts that they're working on. So we wanted to leave you with that, and we thank you again for joining us for this in-depth discussion. I'm Vanessa Ruffes. We'll see you next time.